stuck, and I couldn't figure out why, but it was just girls weren't, it was all the little boys at home that were going, "Oh, he's so cute." And if I, every day I get a message from someone, or, a note on a post of, "Gosh, you were my crush when I was a kid." And it's all men. It's all guys my age. So, yeah, everybody knew but me.
Interesting. So then, I mean, I know, I remember, because we're around the same age, like when the National Enquirer, broke this story, like how did that go down? And like who then, I mean, Alyssa, I guess didn't, but like who else did anyone know from who's the boss? How does that like do you answer the phone like, hey, this is the Enquirer, we're gonna run with this story, whether you cooperate or not, just FYI?
Yeah, pretty much. What had happened was, the part of the story that people don't know is, there was a radio station. I don't even remember where, but somehow they got a hold of me, my phone number. And I don't know if maybe somebody had tipped them off. I'm not really sure the backstory, but I was literally in the middle of finals at Stanford, and I got a call from this radio station. They're like, "You're live on air with whatever." And I was like, "Okay." And I don't know, I answered some questions about Stanford or who's the boss. And then they asked me something, and my answer was a little fishy, which was, I'm exploring my options when it came to, like, do you have a girlfriend? And I don't know if they contacted the Enquirer, or the Enquirer heard this. I don't know. I'm not really sure how that happened. But then, like, a week later, the Enquirer called, and we've done some research, and we know what's going on there at Stanford, and we're going to do a story about it. What do you think? And I was like, I'm going to need to get back to you on this. And I just hung up the phone and instantly called Judith, because at the time, I mean, she's always been an advocate beyond. She is the mother of advocacy for the LGBT plus community. But at the time, especially, she was an icon for that. And I called her and I said, "Look, I don't know what to do." And she said, "Look, they cannot misquote you. If there's one thing a journalist can't do, is misquote you. They can construe what you say, but if you give them mature, adult, honest answers, it can't be a bad article. But if you choose not to interview with them, they're going to turn it into a scandalous thing and make a mess of it." And so I said, "You're right." So I called the Enquirer back, and I told them the truth. I just told them how I was feeling and what I was going through and where I'd been. And believe it or not, if you reread the article, it's actually quite good, in terms of respect, and it's really not very salacious at all, for the Enquirer.
Right.
So I appreciated that, but it was very true. They can't make it a salacious article if I'm being mature and saying, I've been taking some time to figure out who I am and what that means, and it's been really hard, blah blah blah. They can't turn that around.
And you think it's really just because you picked up this phone with this radio station and said, I'm exploring my options? I mean, that's a pretty,
Absolutely. I think so. I mean, they could not be connected, but they were so close together, that it has to have been the reason, for sure.
I mean, I think absolutely is a good answer because I mean, exploring your options, there's only one way to really do that.
Yeah, and I had already been living freely at Stanford. I told my family by that point, and I again, maybe the fates. I'm a big believer in sort of the universe, or the fates, or whatever the energy is, whatever you want to call. Everyone's, matter is just energy vibrating, right? And I've always said that you might call it God. Some people call it whatever you might call it. I sort of call it just the energy of the universe, and maybe the decision to just not back away from it wasn't like I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be this, like, gay icon. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna, like," no. It was far from it. It was terrifying, and I absolutely knew that my career would be over the moment I started talking about it. But it just never occurred to me to not be honest and talk about it. So I still have to explore why I did that. But I really think there was more going on.
I think I agree. Like everything happens for a reason. It's kind of the thing. Did you, when you said this to this radio station, did you have a like hanging up the phone, like, oh shit moment? Or were you just like, all right,
Yes.
whatever. You did.
Yes, I totally did. I think in the middle of the call, maybe right after I said that, depending on and I think whatever their answer was, oh, that was exactly why we called him. Like they were trying to get me to go there, and they succeeded, those little fuckers. And I just remember I had this moment where I could feel the blood like rushing to my face, and I knew more would come of it for sure. I didn't know what, but I knew more would come of it.
And then the Enquirer was like shortly
And then
thereafter. So you're
shortly
like,
thereafter, yeah.
so at that point, like I guess Judith Light knew because you called her, like you already told her prior, like
Yes.
you were out in your life, you just weren't out to the world.
Out to the world, yeah. And Tony, everybody else found out once the article came out, and I think they quoted Tony in it. I don't remember. I know they quoted Judith, Tony was quoted sometime afterwards as being supportive. Everybody was supportive, so and they're not going to be supportive. I mean, that's a bad move, right? In terms of sort of a publicity choice. But even outside of whatever they were quoted as saying, everybody was really supportive from the cast. So never an issue with that for sure.
Were you worried? I mean, this is such a stereotypical question, but it was the 80s, 90s. Like, were you worried about Tony? Just like straight male. Like, I mean, that's, we've all come out that anyone that's
Yeah,
come out realizes there is difference between telling your best girlfriend and telling that
you know,
straight guy.
I yes and no. And the reason I say that it wasn't like, oh God, I'm terrified of what he'll say, is because you have to remember he's been working on film and TV sets with lots of gay men for the last 20 years, right? The hairstylists, the makeup artists, the dressers, the costumers. So all of these LGBTQ plus people are in his life, and he's always treated those people really well. So I didn't really have a reason to doubt that he would, but yeah, of course, the Italian sort of macho man side of it, of course I'm worried of what he's going to say, but I had the experience of him treating all of the people on Who's the Boss that were, I don't know if they were all out publicly, but certainly, being gay on set, and treating them all so well that I thought, oh, there's no way he's going to have an issue with it. I had more issues with my parents than I did with Tony.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, when this was coming out, were you worried, like you said, like, oh, my career will never be the same? Like, did you have personal things like, oh, I got to tell my parents, like, or was it more career or was it both? Because at that point you were at Stanford, but you wouldn't really leave acting, or was it kind of like all the above?
All of the above, for sure. I think the hardest part for my parents was that they just couldn't wrap their mind around the idea that I chose to do it, because they knew that I knew that it would be the end of my career, and their hope always was that after Stanford I'd get back into the business. They were terrific parents, but a lot of who they were as people was